I'd like to welcome everyone to our few minutes together on the Parsha. This Shabbos we have the privilege of reading Parshas Lech Lecha, which discusses the beginning of the family of Avraham Avinu and the Jewish people. The Torah is like a large view starting on the outside of the world, taking in view of the whole universe as it was created. Then it focuses more closely on the earth itself. Then it focuses more closely on the family of Noach, and then within the family of Noach, specifically on the descendants of Shem. And finally, it hones in like a camera that went from a wide angle to a very specific point, showing us Avraham Avinu and all that happens with his family. And Lech Lecha begins the view of that family. And when talking about that family, the Ramban, towards the beginning of the Sedra, says that there's a general rule that you can tell us, that he can tell us in reference to all that happened to Avraham, to Yitzchak, and to Yaakov, and to the Jewish people. And he mentions it, that he quotes it from the Tanchuma, where it says, Kol ma she'ira la'avos, all that which happened to the fathers, siman levanim, is a sign to the children. So that means, if we'll analyze and we'll see that Avraham came to the land of Israel and then he had to go down to Mitzrayim because there was a famine, sure enough, later on his descendants, in Yaakov's time, there was a famine and they had to go down to Mitzrayim. And many other examples of what we call Maaseh Avos Siman Levanim can be found throughout the Torah, especially to the Avos, and throughout the history of the Jewish people wandering from place to place. One of the interesting things that happens at the beginning of the Sedra is that when Avraham Avinu enters into the land of Israel, we know that he came down from the northeast, from the Mesopotamian area, and he comes down into the land of Egypt, coming into the land of Israel, coming down into the Galil at first. And the Torah tells us that he goes down through the northern part of Israel, Ad Makom Shechem. He comes down to the place of Shechem, where the Canaanites were then in the land, and Hashem appears to him, and he builds a Mizbeach, and so on. And then the Torah tells us that Avram kept going, and he kept going more and more to the south. Vayisa Avram, and Avram traveled, Holoch v'nosoa hanegba. He kept traveling further and further to the south. Why was Avraham Avinu constantly traveling to the south? What is it that he was looking for when Hashem told him to go to this land? He didn't tell him to stop at any one particular place. And after he came to the land, he just keeps going towards the south. There must be some reason why the Torah tells us that he kept going towards the south. Rav Shamshon Furl Hirsch, in his own inimitable fashion, so beautifully explains that Avraham Avinu looked at the lush beauty of the northern part of Israel, and he saw the beautiful plains and fields and the abundance of the fruits and how fertile and lush, how verdant the land was, and he knew that that was not the purpose of his coming into the land. Those were, you might say, extras that would help him and his children and his descendants appreciate the land. But what he knew was, I've got to keep going towards the Negev, towards the dryness, towards the south. Because there in the south, there are no physical attractions to merit that we should have the land. But there in the south, there's an emptiness. And what attracts the Jewish people and Avraham Avinu towards that south was the spirituality of Yerushalayim and the southern gateway, because Yerushalayim really is the gateway towards the south. Not far from there, of course, come the Orei Yehuda, the cities of Judah, and the Midbar Yehuda, leading down to the Negev itself. So Avraham was constantly going towards the Negev, where there were no physical distractions to disturb him from his pursuit of spirituality. We too, we have to realize that we should be constantly Maaseh Avos Siman Levanim, going towards the south, to try to recognize that our purpose in this world is not just a physical purpose, but it's to achieve an element of spirituality. We need to inject a little spirituality into our lives. We need to feel that there's a higher purpose and connect with the source of that spirit, which is the neshama, which is a spark of God himself. And therefore, Maaseh Avosim Levanim, the deeds of the fathers are signs to the children. And just as Avram constantly sought spirituality by going further to the south, so in our lives, despite the fact that we have a lot of wealth, and despite the fact that we have a lot of physical accoutrements which make us feel comfortable, we need to spend some time studying Torah, davening with a minyan, going to the south, trying to develop that sense of spirituality. That is part of the legacy of Avraham Avinu. I'd like to take this opportunity to wish you all a wonderful Good Shabbos.